Which scene was the hardest to film or experience while filming, or any scene that stayed with you? This is from Maria.
The couch? That sounds so daunting.
It was the couch. No.
I was actually on set that day.
I don't know.
So, yeah.
Maybe.
The what? Yeah, I mean, our thing, it was actually interesting because our director also plays my other love interest. And so I think when we were in scenes together, he was like, whoa, you seem like you're in love with him. I'm like, yeah, it's Atlas. Like, yeah. He's like, but you seem like you're in love with him, but you love Ryle. And I was like, no, I also love Ryle, but like, I really love Atlas. You love Ryle. And I was like, wait, I'm sorry. Wait, what's happening? But you love Ryle. And I'm like, no, I do. But like, she's conflicted. That was always an interesting dynamic when you have somebody who's playing the character also being the one like looking at the movie. So we were always like, are we too connected? Are we too vibing? Yeah. But she loves Ryle. He's the best. I mean, she loves Atlas. She also loves Ryle. She love them. So yeah, that was always tricky for me because I was like, who do I love?
Hey friends, it's Katie from Welcome Back to my channel. So during Book Bonanza, Blake Lively really went all out, and I found a bunch of clips of her acting wild. But there was also this panel discussion where she made some surprising claims. She talked about stealing the film and bringing it to Book Bonanza to show an unfinished version. It wasn't just any version. It was a rough first cut she had been working on, something that had already been screened multiple times. Her cut, however, didn't perform as well as Justin's. But instead of following the instructions given by Sony and Wayfair, she went ahead and brought the film with her anyway, screening it for 2,500 people. But that wasn't the only thing that raised eyebrows at the event. Blake also had some seriously inappropriate interactions with Brandon Sklenar. What makes this even more surprising is that she had previously made Wayfair sign a document outlining specific rules for on-set behavior. Yet, during the first day of Book Bonanza, while sitting on a panel, she implied something shocking. She suggested that Justin Balan, the film's director and also her on-screen love interest, was jealous. The way she said it strongly hinted that Justin was not just professionally invested, but also emotionally and physically attracted to her. And as you saw in that first clip, the implication she was making was clear. The film's director, who played her love interest, was supposedly envious of the on-set chemistry she had with Brandon Sklenar. According to Blake, because her character radiated love toward Atlas, played by Brandon, Justin allegedly felt threatened. It was almost as if she was claiming that the love triangle in the movie was happening in real life, with Justin and Brandon actually competing for her affection. Now let's think about this for a second. How does that even make sense? In what world does an actress believe that fictional love interests in a movie are also fighting over her in real life? If you take her words at face value, you might assume, oh wow, now everything makes sense. That's why Justin was supposedly inappropriate on set. But there's another way to look at it. Justin was the director of a movie, and at that specific point in the story, Lily, the character, was meant to be in love with Ryle, not Atlas. They hadn't seen each other in years, had no active connection, and had been living completely separate lives. So this whole idea that their on-screen romance was mirroring real life, it just doesn't add up. Imagine not seeing someone for years, then suddenly in a movie, your character is supposed to be madly in love with them again. That doesn't even make sense. But Blake took simple direction, being told to look at Ryle with love and not overplay her connection with Brandon, and somehow twisted it into a story about real-life jealousy. The reality is, Brandon's character was an old love, not the current one, so naturally, the focus had to be on Ryle. But instead of taking that as a professional cue, she turned it into something personal, as if Justin had feelings for her, in real life. Now think about it this way. I was talking to my husband about this. If actors and actresses constantly have to pretend in their roles, yet take things personally when given direction, it creates a messy situation. And in Blake's case, she completely misinterpreted what was happening on set. If a director tells an actress, "In this scene, your character loves Ryle, not Atlas," and she jumps to the conclusion that the director must secretly have feelings for her, that's a huge stretch. But somehow, in her mind, that's exactly what happened. If you take that kind of thinking even further, it becomes even more ridiculous. It's like assuming that every time an actor plays a romantic lead, their director is actually trying to make a pass at them. But that's not how filmmaking works. It's storytelling. And this is where Blake's claims really start falling apart. She has taken things completely out of context and made it seem like she was personally being pursued, when in reality, nothing like that ever happened. None of this was real life. There was no romantic or emotional connection between her and Justin beyond what was required for filming. They were not dating. They were not secretly in love. He wasn't jealous of her. And to top it off, Brandon was reportedly in a relationship as well. But here's the interesting part. Blake seems far more obsessed with Brandon than she ever was with Justin. Her fixation on him went beyond just innocent on-set chemistry. And let's not forget, back in November 2023, she took extreme steps to control the narrative. She forced everyone involved in the production to sign a strict document outlining what could and couldn't be discussed. According to this contract, there were to be absolutely no conversations about sex, no discussing anyone's personal relationships, no inappropriate jokes, and no walking in on her in her trailer. The restrictions were over the top, almost like she was setting the stage to control what was being said about her, while ensuring no one could challenge her version of events. The document, titled Protections for Return to Production, laid out a strict list of demands that had to be agreed to before she would even consider coming back to work. And yet, after all that, she still found a way to create drama. An intimacy coordinator had to be present at all times whenever Blake Lively was on set. No scenes involving physical touch, simulated intimacy, or nudity could be improvised. Everything had to be carefully choreographed in advance with full consent from all participants. Even scenes that involved kissing or romantic interactions had to be planned out ahead of time. Any physical contact, whether on-screen or off, could only happen if it was strictly written into the script or absolutely necessary for makeup and costume preparation. No one was allowed to comment on her physical appearance unless it was directly related to her character, and even then, it had to be tied to the scene itself. But it didn't stop there. She also made Wayfair agree that no one could touch her, not even a friendly hug, nor could anyone from her on-set personnel or employees. No compliments, no casual acknowledgement of her looks, nothing. Any discussion about her physical presence had to be in the context of her role as Lily, not as Blake herself. No one was allowed to enter her trailer unannounced. Conversations about personal experiences, especially those related to intimacy, were completely off limits. She even had the right to have a personal representative present on set during rehearsals and filming to ensure these rules were followed. On top of that, there was a strict no retaliation policy, meaning that if anyone violated these guidelines, they couldn't push back in any way. These were all demands she made, stating that the workplace wasn't safe for her unless every single one of these conditions was met, and surprisingly, the production agreed. But here's the interesting part. Nowhere in this document was there any indication that something inappropriate had actually happened to her. There were no accusations or specific incidents mentioned, just a list of demands she required in order to return to work. And that's where things get even more mind-blowing. After forcing everyone to abide by these strict rules, she went on to completely contradict herself. The very things she didn't want anyone to do to her, commenting on her, discussing anything personal or touching her, she turned around and did to Brandon. During the press tour, she made remarks about him. At Book Bonanza, while introducing the film to audiences, she once again made inappropriate comments about him in a way that would make your jaw drop. And the irony? His reaction said it all. He looked just as stunned as anyone watching.
It was before his Brazilian butt lift too, so like we have to show.
I just couldn't fit it in. I just couldn't fit it in before the film.
I know. Isabella and I made these jeans today because we're really good with iron-on patches. Anyway.
I say, what about you? What do you like?
I am fired now.
Moving moving to Belize.
Yeah, you guys are gonna be like, not my Atlas. And then he's never gonna have a career again.
Yep.
No, I'm, you go ahead, you talk. Isabella and I made his jeans today. Check it out. Wait, you talk, you're charming.
I'm Brandon, I play Atlas.
Show me your pants, show me your booty. Isabella, right? Get it. Isabella. You didn't show him your pants. Oh my god, wait, you have to see Brandon's pants. Someone turn on the lights. No, seriously, he let me and Isabella iron on patches.
You did a thing on the pants. Boom.
No one was allowed to comment on her physical appearance. They couldn't touch her, discuss their personal lives with her, or even have casual conversations that weren't strictly work-related. These were her rules, strict, non-negotiable, and enforced on set. And yet, while she was representing the studio and promoting this film at Book Bonanza, a project backed by Wayfair Studios and Sony, she had no problem flipping the script. She openly joked about Brandon's body, made remarks about him getting a Brazilian butt lift, and repeatedly had him show off his backside to the audience. She flirted with him, called him charming, and even made him reenact a flirty exchange from the movie over and over again. And at one point, while joking about their careers, she outright said that Brandon would never work again. Now, let's switch the perspective for a second. Imagine if the roles were reversed. If Brandon had been the one making jokes about Blake's body, referencing cosmetic procedures and playfully urging her to flaunt herself in front of an audience, would people have just laughed it off? Absolutely not. If he had publicly commented on her body in the same way she did to him, the backlash would have been swift and severe. If he had asked her to show off for a crowd during every film introduction, she would have called it harassment. But somehow when she does it, it's just playful banter. Her behavior toward Brandon was completely inappropriate, especially considering the extreme boundaries she forced Wayfair to establish for herself. It's hard not to see the hypocrisy in all of this. And then there's another layer to this whole situation. During the press tour, Blake refused to acknowledge victims of domestic violence, despite the fact that this film was supposed to highlight that issue. Instead of focusing on the real message behind the story, she kept presenting it as a lighthearted romance, a feel-good female empowerment movie, almost like a rom-com. She actively avoided discussions about the serious themes of domestic abuse, ignoring the survivors who connected with the film for its raw and emotional portrayal of their struggles. Yet now, when it suits her, she suddenly wants the public to see her as a victim. She refused to stand with actual victims when it mattered, but now she's asking for sympathy, framing herself as the one who has been wronged. It's classic deflection, a complete reversal of the narrative to serve her own image. It's the same tactic narcissists use. It's projection, and that's just my opinion.
Film about domestic violence. This isn't a film about domestic violence. This isn't a film about domestic violence. It's a film that covers a lot of things, from first love to being an entrepreneur and opening your first shop and having all your dreams come true, to falling in love, to finding a new best friend, to domestic violence, which you don't hear all of those things in one place. But you know, this isn't a story, this isn't a love story, this isn't a love triangle, and this isn't a film about domestic violence.
At the screening of It Ends With Us, which she attended alongside Isabella Ferrer, Blake stood on stage and made a bold statement to the audience. She insisted that this film was not about domestic violence. Instead, she framed it as a story about a woman navigating life, opening a flower shop, reconnecting with her first love, and finding a new best friend. She acknowledged that domestic violence was present in the film, but downplayed it, saying it wasn't the central theme. She made a point to emphasize that domestic violence does not define a woman. She repeatedly stated that no woman is defined by what a man does to her, whether positive or negative. This statement carried weight, and yet, when you flip it around and apply it to her own situation, it raises questions. If we're supposed to accept her claim that women are not defined by what happens to them, then why is she now asking for sympathy by positioning herself as a victim of what she claims took place on set? Shouldn't that same logic apply to her? If she isn't defined by her experiences, then she isn't defined by what she says happened during filming either. And yet, here we are, watching her shift the narrative to suit her needs. This kind of manipulation is something that narcissists are often accused of, but if you dare to call her one, you're immediately labeled as a mommy sleuth in certain media circles, like that Glamour magazine article. Regardless, one thing remains clear. Blake has a unique ability to twist and reshape narratives depending on how she wants to be perceived. This weekend, I had a conversation with someone who has worked in crisis PR for over 20 years. While they never worked directly with Blake or Ryan, their experience in the industry has given them insight into how these power dynamics play out. According to them, the general feedback on Blake, especially from those who worked with her, on Gossip Girl, was overwhelmingly negative. Allegedly, both she and her mother were extremely difficult, demanding, and at times outright rude. This PR insider also mentioned that in all their years working in the business, they had never encountered anyone with a positive story about working with Ryan. His on-set reputation, according to them, was far from the charming, fun-loving persona he presents to the public. But here's the catch. None of that matters publicly because money and power dictate the narrative. Studios, networks, and industry players will always cover for high-earning celebrities, ensuring that negative press doesn't reach the masses. There are NDAs, carefully curated public images, and too much at stake financially for anyone to be entirely honest about what goes on behind the scenes. And this brings us back to Blake's own contradictions. She set strict boundaries for Justin, Jamie, and Wayfair, demanding that they behave in a specific way around her. Yet when it came to her own interactions with Brandon at Book Bonanza, those rules didn't seem to apply. She openly flirted with him, joked about his body, and made comments that, if the roles were reversed, would have been deemed inappropriate. To top it all off, she even paid for Brandon and Isabella's flights to the event. That alone raises even more questions about her true motivations. She covered Brandon's lodging expenses, and at that point, she was acting as his employer. As a producer and representative of the studio, she held a position of power. In a professional setting, an employer should never objectify an employee, make inappropriate remarks about their body, or pressure them into playing along with something that makes them uncomfortable. Yet, that's exactly what she did. She repeatedly made Brandon the subject of jokes about his body, encouraged comments about his appearance, and even had him show off his butt in front of audiences. The irony? She wasn't even paying him for this event, only covering his expenses, which meant he likely felt obligated to go along with it. If the roles were reversed and Brandon had been the one making these remarks about her body, it would have been labeled as sexual harassment. So, at the end of the day, who is really the victim here? Is she genuinely someone who was mistreated, or is she just projecting her own behavior onto others?